Olivia Easton's red Maserati spun out on the slick, rain-drenched road with a screech that echoed through the hills, her heart slamming against her ribs as the world tilted sideways. The last thing she saw before the airbags deployed was the blur of a tree coming straight for her. When the world stopped spinning, so did her breath. Smoke curled from the hood in ghostly tendrils as the rain pounded the shattered windshield. She blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of the crack in the glass above her and the sharp sting in her shoulder. "Are you okay?" "Hey, you in there." The voice was deep and urgent, and it cut through the haze in her head like a knife. A man yanked open the driver's side door, his face shadowed by the downpour, his hands steady even as water soaked his shirt. I think so," Olivia whispered, her voice hoarse. "Your car's totaled. You're lucky that tree didn't go through the windshield." He crouched down beside her, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Can you move?" She nodded slowly, trying to unbuckle her seatbelt with trembling fingers. He leaned in, brushing her hands aside and releasing the belt himself. Then, without asking, he lifted her into his arms. "Wait, what are you doing?" she gasped, clutching his shoulders. "Getting you out of the car before something explodes." "You smell that," he said, striding across the wet gravel toward a beat-up Navy Ford truck parked nearby. "That's coolant and oil, not a good combo," she should have argued. She should have demanded to know who he was. But instead, she found herself tucking her face against his chest, shaken, cold, and too stunned to speak. He set her gently in the passenger seat of his truck, slamming the door shut behind her before circling around and sliding into the driver's seat. "Name's Flynn Walker." "You hit my mailbox," she blinked at him. "Seriously," he glanced at her, his mouth twitching. "Relax, mailbox can be replaced, you not so much." He reached behind the seat and pulled out a faded towel, draping it over her shoulders. Olivia looked down at the towel, then at him. "Do you always rescue half-dead women from totaled sports cars?" "Only on Tuesdays," he replied, turning the key. The engine rumbled to life. She stared out the windshield as he pulled onto the winding road, her Maserati shrinking in the rearview mirror. "I can call someone, a tow service." "Or my assistant." Flynn didn't answer immediately. "You're not calling anyone until we get you checked out. My place is 5 minutes away. You're shaking so hard your teeth are rattling." "I'm fine," she muttered, though her hands were ice and her head was spinning. "You don't look fine. You look like someone who just cheated death." She swallowed hard and pressed her forehead to the cool window. Flynn lived in a small farmhouse tucked behind a row of tall pines. It wasn't fancy, but it radiated warmth, light spilling from the windows, smoke curling from the chimney, a cozy wraparound porch with a rocking chair that creaked in the wind. He helped her out of the truck and into the house without another word. The scent of cinnamon drifted through the air as she stepped into the living room. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Toys littered the floor. A small drawing taped to the fridge read, "I heart suit Dad." Her eyes widened. "You have a kid?" Flynn nodded, tossing his wet jacket on a hook near the door. "Yeah, my daughter Kennedy. She's at my sister's for the night." "You're a single dad?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Yeah," he said again, crossing to the kitchen. "Want tea or whiskey?" She hesitated. "Tea," he made it in silence. She sat on the edge of his couch, clutching the towel around her shoulders like a shield. "So," he said, setting the steaming mug on the coffee table in front of her, "you gonna tell me who you are?" She looked up at him, her lips twitching. "Olivia Easton." Flynn's brows lifted. "As in Easton Technologies," she stiffened. "You know it, I'm not living under a rock. You're the CEO who turned down that $200 million buyout last month. You're kind of a badass." Her mouth parted, surprised by the hint of admiration in his voice. "Didn't expect you to be driving a Maserati up a mountain road in the middle of a storm, though." "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said, exhaling. "I was headed to an investor retreat upstate. Took a wrong turn, GPS glitched. Then it started raining. And then you hit my mailbox," she laughed, the sound catching her off guard. It had been weeks, maybe months, since she'd laughed like that. Flynn leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed over his broad chest, watching her. "You hungry?" she hesitated. "Kind of. Great. I made lasagna earlier. Not fancy, but Kennedy swears it's better than her school's lunch ladies." 15 minutes later, she was curled up on his couch with a blanket over her legs, a plate of homemade lasagna in her lap, and Flynn sitting across from her, sipping his own tea. The fire cast a warm glow over the room. "This is good," she said, surprised. "I don't mess around when it comes to pasta." "You cook, rescue people, and raise a kid. What are you, a unicorn?" he chuckled. "Just a guy who had to grow up fast. Kennedy's mom left when she was 6 months. It's been just us for the last 5 years. Olivia set her plate down and looked at him. "That must be hard." "It is. But it's also the best thing that's ever happened to me," he said. "She's everything." The way he said it, no hesitation, no bitterness, hit her deep in the chest. She leaned back and sighed. "I don't slow down, ever. I don't even know why I'm telling you this, but my life is just meetings, flights, deadlines. I haven't had a real day off in 2 years. Flynn's gaze locked on hers. "Maybe crashing your car was the universe telling you to stop." She swallowed, her throat tight. "Maybe." A beat passed, quiet and thick with something she couldn't name. Flynn looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead he stood. "You should get some rest." "Guest rooms down the hall, first door on the left. Tow truck can come in the morning." She blinked. "You're letting me stay. You're in no shape to go anywhere. And I'm not letting some CEO freeze to death because she's too stubborn to accept help." She stood too, suddenly unsure of how to respond. "Thanks, Flynn," he nodded once. "Good night, Olivia." As she walked to the guest room, her bare feet sinking into the worn rug, she paused in the hallway. There were drawings on the wall, crayon stick figures, rainbows, a crooked sun with a giant smile. This man was nothing like the people in her world. And yet, she felt safer with him than she had in years. She turned to look at him one last time. He stood by the fire, staring into the flames, his jaw tight, his profile strong and steady. Maybe crashing her Maserati was the best thing that had ever happened to her, because something told her life had just taken a turn she'd never expected. The scent of pine and old wood drifted into Olivia's nose as she stirred beneath the heavy quilt. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the soft, honey-colored morning light filtering through the guest room curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the ache in her shoulder flared, and it all came rushing back, the crash, the rain, the man with steady hands and storm-dark eyes. Flynn. She pushed the blanket aside and sat up, her muscles stiff from the night before. A worn flannel shirt too large to be hers hung on the back of a nearby chair. She reached for it, slipping it over the thin tank top she'd slept in. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. Voices floated down the hallway, a high-pitched giggle, a deeper laugh in response. She stepped into the hall, guided by the clinking of silverware and the faint hum of her radio playing something old and twangy. As she reached the kitchen, she paused in the doorway. Flynn stood at the stove, flipping something on a cast iron skillet. A little girl with dark curls and a face full of freckles sat cross-legged on the counter beside him, holding a whisk like a scepter. Both turned when she entered. "You're awake," Flynn said, giving her a once-over with his eyes. "You look like you survived a car crash." "I feel like I wrestled a bear," she replied, tugging the flannel tighter. "This your assistant chef," the girl grinned. "I'm Kennedy. Are you the lady who crashed into our mailbox?" Olivia blinked, then gave a short laugh. "That's me." Kennedy tilted her head. "You're way prettier than I pictured," Flynn groaned. "What did I tell you about saying everything that pops into your head?" Kennedy shrugged. "It's not mean if it's true." Olivia smiled, drawn in by the girl's easy energy. "Thanks, I think," Flynn motioned to the table. "Sit. You're not leaving until you eat something." "I really should call a tow truck," she said, hesitating. "You're not walking down that hill in heels. Roads are still slick." "I wasn't planning to walk," she said, arching a brow. Flynn reached into his back pocket and pulled out a phone. "Reception's terrible up here. You want me to drive down and make the call from town?" She hesitated, then glanced at Kennedy, who was now licking batter off the whisk. "Only if you're not busy," Olivia said. Flynn poured a stack of golden pancakes onto a plate. "I'm always busy. Doesn't mean I don't make time." He slid the plate in front of her, added a mug of coffee, and leaned against the counter. "I can leave after breakfast," she offered. "I don't want to impose." "You're not." Kennedy was excited to meet someone who isn't related to her or a chicken. The girl piped up, mouth full. "We used to have a rooster named Kevin. He chased the mailman, Flynn shook his head. Kevin is no longer with us. He got eaten by a fox, Kennedy added cheerfully. Olivia's brows lifted. This is not how I expected my day to go. Me neither, Flynn said, his eyes lingering on her for a beat too long. After breakfast, Flynn disappeared into the mudroom to grab his boots while Kennedy showed Olivia the drawing she was working on a colorful spaceship with stick figure astronauts labeled Me and Dad. Olivia listened, intrigued by the vibrant world Kennedy created with just crayons and imagination. When Flynn returned, he was shrugging into a jacket. I'll be back in an hour. You'll be okay here? Olivia nodded. We'll survive. Kennedy gave her a thumbs up. I'll protect her. Once the door shut behind him, Olivia turned to the little girl. So what's it like living out here? Kennedy swung her legs. It's quiet, but we have a treehouse and sometimes deer come into the yard. One time we even saw a moose. A moose. Yup, I named him George. He didn't stay long. Olivia chuckled, then glanced around the room. Your dad built this place. Kennedy hopped off the chair. Nope, it was Grandpa's before he moved to Florida. Dad fixed it up though. He's good with tools and pancakes. Seems like he's good at a lot of things, Olivia murmured. Kennedy squinted at her. Do you like my dad? The question caught Olivia off guard. What? You're looking at him like Mom used to look at movie stars. Olivia blinked. You are very observant, Kennedy beamed. I know. While Flynn was gone, Olivia helped Kennedy clean up the dishes, then joined her on the porch swing. The air was brisk but clean, the kind of crispness money couldn't buy in a penthouse suite. Beyond the trees, the world stretched wide and quiet. You don't seem like a normal grown-up, Kennedy said after a while. Why's that? You're not on your phone all the time, and you listen when I talk. Olivia leaned back against the wooden slats. Maybe I needed a break. Kennedy nodded sagely. Breaks are good. Dad says even superheroes need naps sometimes. When Flynn returned, he found them curled up under a blanket watching a squirrel dart across the porch railing. His gaze softened as he took in the scene. Tow truck's coming this afternoon, he said, stepping inside. They'll haul the car into town. Mechanic's going to call you with the damage estimate. Olivia stood, brushing off her jeans. Thank you, Flynn, for everything. He shrugged off the gratitude. Any decent person would have done the same. No, she said, meeting his eyes. They wouldn't. He held her gaze for a beat, then looked away. You're welcome. Later that afternoon, Olivia stepped outside to take a call. When she came back in, her expression was unreadable. Flynn glanced up from where he was helping Kennedy with a puzzle. Everything okay? I have to head back to the city tonight. There's an emergency with one of our contracts. Legal wants me on site. Flynn nodded. Makes sense. You sound disappointed. He didn't answer right away. Would have been nice to have another day. She crossed the room slowly. Would it have? Flynn stood. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've met someone who didn't treat me like a fixer-upper. Her breath caught. You think I don't. I think you're different. But I also think your world is a million miles from mine. Olivia stepped closer. Maybe I'm tired of my world. For a moment, neither moved. The tension between them hummed like a live wire. But then Kennedy yawned and asked for a snack, and the moment dissolved. That evening, Flynn helped her pack the few things she'd borrowed. As she stood in the doorway, he handed her a small paper bag. What's this? Fresh sourdough. Baked it last night for Kennedy's lunches. Figured you could use something real before you go back to boardrooms and power suits. She held the bag tightly. You keep surprising me. He leaned against the doorframe. That's the thing about people like me. You don't see us until you crash, she hesitated. I don't want to wait for another crash to see you again. Flynn studied her. You saying that because you mean it. Or because you feel guilty about the mailbox, she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll call you if that's all right. He nodded once. You know where to find me. As she drove away in a borrowed pickup from the mechanic, all they had available, Olivia looked in the rearview mirror. Flynn stood in the fading light, arms crossed, a quiet silhouette against the warm glow of his porch. Kennedy waved beside him, grinning like she'd already written a new ending to the story. Olivia didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in years, she hoped the next wrong turn brought her right back here, 3 weeks. That's how long it had been since Olivia Easton had driven away from Flynn Walker's porch with a paper bag of sourdough and a knot in her stomach that hadn't loosened since. Now she stood in the center of a high-rise conference room in Midtown Manhattan, staring out at her rain-drenched skyline while two junior associates argued behind her over contract revisions. The city buzzed below, indifferent and endless, but her mind wasn't on the merger. It was on a farmhouse wrapped in pine trees, on a man whose voice still echoed in her head at night, on a little girl who asked questions no one else dared. "You're not listening," Rhonda, her general counsel, said from across the sleek glass table. "I am," Olivia replied, turning back. "But you're all talking in circles. We're not giving them equity. We license the software, not our soul." Rhonda nodded, then glanced at the others. "You heard her. Let's rework the proposal." The room emptied within minutes. Olivia remained behind, unwilling to face her office just yet. She'd buried herself in work the moment she returned. 12-hour days, dinner meetings, a fundraiser for a tech education initiative she barely remembered sponsoring. But none of it dulled the restlessness clawing at her. Her assistant, Vera, knocked on the doorframe. "You have a lunch reservation at the Winston with Lawrence from Capitol Hedge. Want me to push it?" "No," Olivia said, grabbing her coat. "I'll go." The Winston was the kind of place where power whispered instead of roared, crystal glasses, white linen, waiters who never interrupted. Lawrence was already seated when she arrived, sipping sparkling water and checking his gold watch. "You look like you haven't slept in days," he said once they exchanged pleasantries. "Thanks, Lawrence. Always a joy," he leaned in. "You're running on fumes." Whatever this is, burnout, distraction, midlife crisis, take a sabbatical. Let your board babysit the empire for once. She sipped her espresso and said nothing. He continued. "Or maybe this has something to do with that mountain accident I heard about, Maserati versus Oak Tree." "That was you, wasn't it?" Her hand stilled. "I have friends in upstate insurance," he added. "Word gets around." She set her cup down. "What I do with my personal time isn't Capitol Hedge's concern. Maybe not, but you've never let anything derail you before." He paused. "Except maybe now." That night, Olivia stood in her penthouse kitchen, staring at the untouched takeout on the marble countertop. Outside, the rain fell in soft sheets against the windows. She poured herself a glass of wine, then left it on the table. By the time she reached her bedroom, she'd already made up her mind. She wasn't going to wait for another excuse to see him. She was going back, but not unannounced. The next morning, she made 2 calls. One to a local market near Flynn's town to arrange a delivery. The other to his landline, which she'd saved but never dialed. Kennedy answered. "Hi, it's Olivia. Is your dad around?" There was a pause, then the sound of the phone being muffled. "Dad, the lady from the mailbox is on the phone." Flynn's voice came on a moment later, wary. "Hey, I'm driving up tomorrow," she said. "If that's all right." Silence. Then, "You don't have to. I want to." He didn't answer right away. Then quieter, "Okay." When she pulled into the gravel driveway the next afternoon, she spotted Kennedy first. The little girl was on the porch, wearing a red raincoat and holding a clipboard like a gatekeeper. "Name?" she asked as Olivia stepped out of the rental SUV. "Olivia Easton." Kennedy checked something off. "Purpose of visit, to see your dad. Duration, undetermined." Kennedy grinned. "Permission granted." Flynn stepped out a moment later, wiping his hands on a rag. His hair was slightly longer, his jaw dusted with stubble. He wore gray Henley jeans, and his eyes met hers without flinching. "You found your way back." I didn't need GPS this time. They stared at each other, something unspoken stretching between them. Then Kennedy broke it. "You brought groceries. I saw them in the trunk." Olivia opened the back of the SUV. "Just a few things." "I remembered you said you liked strawberries." Flynn glanced inside. "That's not a few things. That's half the market." "I wasn't sure what you were low on." He looked at her. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." Dinner was quieter than Olivia expected. Kennedy chatted about a science project involving magnets and a failed attempt at baking muffins that had ended in smoke. Flynn mostly listened, only occasionally glancing at Olivia, as if trying to read her intentions without asking. After Kennedy went to bed, they stood on the porch watching the mist roll over the hills. "You didn't just come to bring fruit," Flynn said. "No," she admitted. "Then why?" She turned to face him. "I can't stop thinking about you." His jaw tightened. "You live a different life, Olivia. I know. You're on magazine covers. You're on Kennedy's fridge, he exhaled, looking out at the trees. I don't want her getting attached to someone who leaves. I'm not asking to move in, I'm asking for a chance. Flynn didn't speak for a long time. Then, without turning, he said, You think this is just about schedules and geography, but it's not. Then what is it about? He looked at her, and for the first time she saw the fear behind his calm. Trust. I've built this life brick by brick. I can't let someone knock it down because they got bored of it. I'm not bored, I'm exhausted, and when I was here for those 2 days I felt something I haven't felt in years. What? Peace. Flynn stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking like breath on glass. You're not going to find that peace unless you're honest with yourself. I am. Then prove it. I'm here, aren't I? That's showing up. Proving it is staying when it's inconvenient. She held his gaze. Then let me stay for the weekend. He hesitated. What are you trying to find? She reached for his hand. Flynn didn't pull away. Later that night, as she lay on the guest bed staring at the ceiling, she heard footsteps outside her door. A pause. Then retreating, she closed her eyes. He wasn't ready. But maybe he was beginning to want to be. The next morning, she found Kennedy at the kitchen table with a giant roll of paper and a box of markers. What are you making? Olivia asked. A map of our town, in case you get lost again. Olivia smiled. That's very thoughtful of you. Kennedy looked up. Are you going to be my stepmom? Olivia blinked. That's a big question. Well, you're here and you like Dad, and he made the good pancakes today, which means he likes you back. Olivia crouched beside her. I don't know what's going to happen, but I care about both of you. A lot. Kennedy nodded. Okay, but if you do become my stepmom, can we get a dog? Flynn stepped into the room just then, catching the tail end. We're not getting a dog, Kennedy, but she said she cares about me. That means dog, he gave Olivia a look. You've been here less than 24 hours and she's trying to adopt animals. Olivia laughed. I guess that means I fit in. Flynn didn't answer, but he didn't disagree either. That afternoon, while Kennedy was at a neighbor's birthday party, Flynn took Olivia on a walk through the woods behind the house. The air was cool and fragrant with moss and damp leaves. They spoke little, but the silence between them was no longer heavy. At the edge of the clearing, he stopped. There's a cabin back there, he said. Needs work. I was going to fix it up for Kennedy to use when she's older, somewhere she could go to think. Olivia looked at him. You plan long term, I have to. She reached for his hand again. He let her this time. I want to be part of that plan, she said. Flynn turned to her, his voice low. Don't say that unless you mean it. I never say things I don't mean, he studied her. Then you should know something. What? I haven't felt anything real for anyone in 6 years. And then you crashed through my mailbox like a bat out of hell, and suddenly I can't stop thinking about you either. She stepped closer, her heart thudding. Then what are we waiting for? Flynn leaned in, his breath warm against her cheek. I have no idea. And then he kissed her. Deep, sure, and unhurried, like a man who had been waiting a very long time. And just like that, the distance between their worlds began to disappear. The first snow came quietly. Olivia stood at the edge of the porch, her arms tucked into the sleeves of Flynn's old jacket, watching fat flakes drift onto the pine branches like powdered sugar. The world had softened overnight. White blanketed the fields, the roof, the rusted mailbox that now stood proudly repaired with a new wooden post. Inside, Kennedy was humming as she decorated gingerbread cookies, her tongue poking out in concentration. Flynn leaned against the kitchen island, sipping coffee, his eyes steady on Olivia through the window. They were approaching something unnamed. It had been nearly 4 weeks since Olivia returned to the farmhouse for that weekend that turned into a week, which turned into nearly a month. Her penthouse apartment remained untouched. Her assistant, Vera, now managed her schedule remotely, carefully canceling every non-essential meeting with surgical precision. Not one board member had dared question her absence, not when profits were up. Contracts were closed, and the Easton name carried more weight than ever. But none of it felt as significant as the quiet mornings, the way Kennedy insisted they read together before bed, or the soft rasp of Flynn's voice when he asked if she wanted tea after the world had gone still. She stepped back inside, brushing snow from her sleeves. Snowball fight after lunch, Kennedy asked without looking up. Only if we make teams, Olivia replied. I'm not going down alone, Flynn raised a brow. You're assuming I won't betray you for a better offer. Kennedy cackled. He totally will. He's ruthless. I'm learning. Flynn set his mug down. I need to run into town before the roads ice up, feed store and propane. Olivia gestured toward the coat rack. I'll come with you. He glanced toward Kennedy. We'll only be gone an hour. You good with Aunt Tess? Kennedy nodded. She said she's bringing hot chocolate bombs. I'm not moving from this spot. Flynn grabbed his keys and Olivia followed him out into the crisp air. The truck started with a rumble, snow melting on the windshield in slow, glistening trails. They didn't speak for a while. The silence between them had changed. It no longer pressed. It settled. Comfortable. Familiar. As they passed the frozen lake on the edge of town, Flynn finally spoke. You planning to stay through Christmas? She turned to him. Do you want me to? He didn't answer right away. Kennedy does. She looked out at the snow-covered trees, her breath fogging the glass. I've been thinking about what comes next, about how I thought I knew what that meant. Flynn's hands tightened on the wheel. And now, I'm realizing I've spent years building something that doesn't feel like home. He didn't respond, but she saw the flicker of reaction in his jaw. At the feed store, he loaded bags of pellets while Olivia picked through a display of wool-lined gloves. The man behind the counter tipped his cap at her. Didn't expect to see you again, Miss Easton. I didn't expect to be back either, she said, folding a pair of gloves. But here you are, she nodded. Here I am. Back in the truck, she turned to Flynn as he backed out of the gravel lot. I had an offer last week, a buyout, triple what the last one was. He shot her a glance. You taking it? I'm thinking about it. She paused. I'd keep the name, but I'd be out of the day-to-day. I'd have time, real time. Flynn didn't say anything for several long seconds. Then, you sure you're not just running? I've been running for years. This would be stopping. They reached the house just as the sun broke through the clouds, casting gold over the snow-drenched fields. Olivia helped unload the supplies while Kennedy ran out with Aunt Tess, her cheeks flushed from the cold. Later, after dinner, Kennedy was asleep under a blanket in the living room, a half-finished puzzle beside her. Olivia stepped into the kitchen, where Flynn was drying dishes. I want to ask you something, she said. He didn't turn. Sounds serious. It is. He finally looked at her. If I made this permanent, if I sold the company, moved here part-time, helped Kennedy with school, cooked terrible pasta while you made proper lasagna, what would you say? He set the towel down. I'd say you're not the same woman who crashed into my life 6 weeks ago. She moved closer. I'm not. Flynn's eyes searched hers and something in his expression cracked wide open. I'm scared, he admitted. You're the first person I've let in since Kennedy's mom, and I keep waiting for this to fall apart. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers warm against his skin. Then let's stop waiting. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. You're really staying. I'm not going anywhere. The next morning, Olivia made calls. She signed documents. She gave Vera instructions that stunned even her. And when Flynn came in from the barn, brushing snow from his hair, she handed him a folded letter. What's this? My resignation. Effective immediately. He stared at it. You're serious. I want a life with meaning, and that isn't in skyscrapers or press releases. It's here. She expected him to protest, to question. But instead he stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. I never thought I'd fall in love again, he said into her hair. You didn't, she replied. We fell at the same time. That afternoon, they told Kennedy. She listened with wide eyes, then jumped up and shrieked so loud the dog next door started barking. Does this mean I get 2 parents? Flynn blinked. I mean, Olivia bent down. It means we're going to build something together, the 3 of us. Kennedy threw her arms around both of them. Best day ever. Over the next week, Olivia settled into her new rhythm. She took Kennedy to school, helped Flynn repair the fencing before the snow got worse, and called her interior designer to discuss updating the old cabin behind the clearing into a writing studio. I don't know what I'll do next, she told Flynn one evening as they sat by the fire, but I know I'll be doing it here. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. That's all I need to know. On Christmas morning, Kennedy woke them up at dawn, dragging them downstairs to a living room glowing with lights and the scent of cinnamon. There were matching pajamas, handwritten cards, a small velvet box tucked beneath the tree. Olivia opened it slowly, her breath catching. Inside was a delicate silver ring, simple but elegant, with a small engraving on the inside. Found you. Flynn knelt beside her, steady and sure. I don't need a ceremony. I don't need a dress. I just need you to say yes. Olivia's voice trembled. Yes. Kennedy threw confetti she'd hidden in her robe pocket. We're getting married. Flynn kissed Olivia, long and deep, as snow fell outside the window and the fire crackled beside them. Later, when the farmhouse was quiet and Kennedy was asleep again, Olivia stood on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the horizon shift to pink. Flynn came up behind her, his arms circling her waist. You're really not going back, he said. She leaned into him. I already did that life. Now I'm choosing this one. He rested his chin on her shoulder. Mailbox and all, mailbox and all. And just like that, the woman who had once ruled boardrooms and headlines chose a different kind of empire, one built not on power but on love. Flynn had never expected to fall for her. But then again, neither had she. And neither of them would ever look back. The wedding was quiet, not because Olivia didn't love grand entrances or dramatic moments she always had, but because this wasn't about spectacle. It was about something far rarer, peace. And peace didn't need a ballroom or 1,000 eyes. It only needed the right hearts in the right place. They married in the clearing behind the house, where the old cabin once stood. Now it was a finished studio with tall windows and birch floors, the space filled with light and the faint scent of cedar. It was where Olivia wrote now journals, essays, pieces she never intended to publish but needed to put into the world. Kennedy stood between them as they said their vows, wearing a crown of wildflowers she'd insisted on making herself. Her grin was missing a front tooth, and she clutched a tiny basket of lavender petals she'd scattered with great ceremony before the ceremony even started. Flynn wore a navy suit that had been tucked away in a garment bag for years he'd once bought for a friend's wedding and never thought he'd wear again. Olivia wore a long, ivory dress with sleeves of delicate lace and no train, because she'd insisted on walking through the grass on her own 2 feet. You don't need to give me away, she told Vera, who had flown in to be her maid of honor. No one's giving me to anyone. I'm stepping into this because I choose it. Flynn had said nothing when she'd spoken those words, but his eyes had softened in a way that made her breath catch. He knew. He understood. The ceremony ended with Kennedy throwing her arms around both of them and declaring, now we're officially a team. Which means nobody's allowed to quit. Later, they danced beneath string lights strung between trees, their music a playlist Kennedy had engineered with all the authority of a seasoned DJ. There was jazz, old country, and one Taylor Swift song that made Olivia roll her eyes before laughing and pulling Flynn into the makeshift dance floor anyway. I'm still not convinced she didn't slip that one in to test us, Olivia whispered as they swayed. I think we passed, Flynn murmured. You didn't run. I might have if she'd picked that one about the scarf, he chuckled, his mouth brushing her temple. The guests were few. Vera, of course. Aunt Tess, who had baked the cake and cried through most of the ceremony. A couple of neighbors. Flynn's childhood friend, Illy, who showed up with his wife and a bottle of aged whiskey. That was it. No press. No photographers, no board members analyzing her like a stock report, just people who mattered. After the last song ended, and Kennedy was fast asleep upstairs, having made it through precisely half a slice of cake, before crashing on a pile of pillows, Olivia and Flynn stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the fireflies blink across the field. I never thought I'd do this again, he said, his voice low. Marry someone? No, let someone in. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. You didn't just let me in. You built a door. I didn't know how badly I needed to. Olivia was quiet for a moment. Do you miss the old life? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. Sometimes I miss the rush, the adrenaline, the feeling of closing a deal no one thought I could, but then I think about what I traded it for. And it's not even close. I don't know how you walked away from all that. I didn't walk away. I walked toward this. He kissed her then, slow and sure, as the wind rustled through the trees. By spring, Olivia had converted the studio into a part-time workspace for a local mentorship program she'd launched. She brought in teens from nearby schools' kids who didn't think college was for them, who didn't see a future in tech because they'd never held a laptop that wasn't outdated or cracked. She taught them how to code, how to pitch, how to believe that ideas didn't belong only to men in suits in glass towers. Flynn built the desks himself. Kennedy, now missing 2 more teeth, took to decorating the welcome board with chalk drawings and insisted on giving every new student a tour. She also appointed herself Chief Snack Officer, a title she took very seriously. One afternoon, Olivia walked into the studio to find Kennedy negotiating with a teenager named Mason over the last granola bar. "You can't just take it," Kennedy said, hands on her hips. "These are for people who have actually debugged something today," Mason laughed. "I fixed 3 lines of code. Then you may have half." Flynn leaned in the doorway beside Olivia, watching the scene unfold with quiet pride. "Should we intervene?" he asked. "She's got it handled." That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the hills, Olivia reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a folded paper. "What's that?" Flynn asked. "A letter from the board. They want me to consider coming back in an advisory role. 1 week per quarter, no commitments." He looked at her. "Are you going to?" She shrugged. "I haven't decided, but I'm not afraid of the offer anymore. That's new. You're not afraid of losing your edge. I think I've just found a different kind of edge." She turned to him. "You don't think I'm less ambitious now, do you?" He shook his head. "You're still the most unstoppable person I've ever met. You just found something that matters more." She smiled. "You and Kennedy," he nodded, "and the version of you that only exists here. The one who remembers to breathe." The seasons shifted slowly, like a symphony reaching its gentle crescendo. Summer brought wildflowers and weekend trips to the lake. Fall came with crisp air and Kennedy's first science fair, where she presented a project on solar energy and told the judges, "My mom helped me build the model, but she's not just a mom. She used to run an empire." Olivia had laughed, then cried a little, and Flynn had squeezed her hand until she stopped shaking. By the time winter returned, the studio had doubled in size. A local investor, one of Olivia's former rivals, had visited, seen the work she was doing, and offered to fund an expansion. She'd accepted, but only on one condition: no boardroom meetings, no quarterly reports, and my name stays off the building. The investor had stared at her. "You're serious?" "I'm finally building something that doesn't need my face on it to matter," Kennedy had overheard. That night, she drew a picture of the studio with a rainbow over it and wrote "Mom's Magic School" across the top. Olivia taped it to the fridge. As the new year approached, they hosted a small gathering at the house. Just a few students, neighbors, and friends. Kennedy insisted on making a toast. "I used to think magic was just in movies," she said, standing on a chair in front of the fireplace. "But then my dad found Olivia. And Olivia became my mom. And now we have a house full of pancakes and computers and hugs. So I guess magic is just love that took a long time to find you." Flynn wrapped an arm around Olivia's waist, his eyes damp. "I couldn't have said it better," he whispered. Later, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, they sat wrapped in a blanket before the fire. Kennedy asleep upstairs with her arms wrapped around a stuffed otter Olivia had given her for her birthday. "I never asked," Flynn said softly, "but do you miss the skyline?" "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I've got a better view now." He looked down at her. "Yeah," she rested her head against his chest. "Mountains, stars. And 2 people who make me feel like I'm always home." Flynn kissed the top of her head. They didn't need anything else, not penthouses or headlines, not accolades or applause, just each other. And the quiet, steady love that had started with a crash on a rainy road and grown into a life neither of them had dared to dream. It wasn't the story Olivia Easton had written for herself. It was better.